Video được Việt hóa bởi Ngọc Tân từ group tài nguyên dựng phim.
When we were just starting out, one of the questions we had was, when do we start photographing the bride? I know different photographers will have a different answer to this, but what worked for us is this. Take photos of the bride when the makeup is almost done. If I cannot time it, I just ask one of the bridesmaids to call me once the makeup is done, and I will just ask the makeup artist to do a few brush strokes for me to take pictures, and voila! I have shots of the bride putting on makeup. So next are the beauty shots. Now, why is this important again? Well, for most women, this is one of those rare moments that they get glammed up, so it is our job to take gazillion photos of it. So they will have something to look back to. Plus, later in the day, the bride's makeup will fade. Everyone's going to be sweaty, so at least we were able to take beautiful photos of the bride before things gets crazy. There are no limits when taking beauty shots. You can go from chill to being adventurous with the bride running barefoot outside. But for us, it will depend on the bride and the location. In this case, we were shooting in a very tight space with not much to do outside, so we stuck with nice bedroom beauty shots. When taking photographs of the bride, we like to throw in light jokes depending on the personality of the bride to break the ice and help the bride show organic smiles. For the bride, it is flattering to take photos at a higher angle. This will help their face to look flattering. A lower angle on the other side will emphasize double chins, so we don't want that. We also like complimenting the bride, and this is sincere. Almost all brides look beautiful on their wedding day. They have this glow and joy in their faces because, hello, it is their wedding day after all. So take advantage of that glow and that genuine smile. Compliment their wedding gown or anything pretty that you see that day related to their wedding. It helps them relax and focus on the good things. After the after makeup beauty shots, we proceed with taking pictures with the gown. Bride with the mother and bride with the bridesmaids. As you can see here, we took photos where there is adequate natural lighting. In some cases, I used a diffuser to soften the light. For the camera settings, I usually use auto mode since everything is fast-paced. But if my histogram shows underexposed or overexposed, I switch to manual mode where I can set the aperture, the shutter speed, and ISO. Let me just quickly go over these important camera settings just in case you are not familiar yet. These three settings are important because of number 1, exposure, and number 2, creativity. When you point your camera to your subject and your photo is overexposed due to hard light from the sun, you can adjust one or all these settings to help you get a balanced and well-exposed photo. For example, bumping the ISO really low to darken the photo. The lower the ISO, the darker the photo. And stating the obvious, the higher the number of the ISO, the brighter the image. Now, if bumping the ISO still gives you a bright and overexposed image, you can adjust the shutter speed as well. Just make sure to use a tripod if you will be using a lower shutter speed, because even a bit of camera shake can cause your image to be blurry. For weddings, I honestly stick with higher shutter speed to freeze motions. More of that in the creativity part. Next is the aperture. This is the opening of your lens. The lower the number, the wider the opening, and more light is touching your camera sensor. So the lower the number, the wider the opening of the lens, and the brighter the image. The higher the number, on the contrary, the smaller the opening, and the result is a darker image. Now, moving on to the creativity factor, the aperture is the one responsible for that nice blur called bokeh that you see in most DSLR photos. The lower the aperture number, the more blurry and shallow the background is. When you adjust the aperture to a higher number, the less blur you will get and the deeper the background will be. Now, going back to shutter speed, this setting is responsible for freezing that moment in time, and you can achieve it by bumping up the shutter speed. The higher the shutter speed, the sharper the image, even if it's moving when you took the photo. High shutter speed gives you the freeze the moment effect. On the other hand, if you set the shutter speed really low, it will result in a blurry image. Not just the background, but the entire image, which is not great for wedding photos. Finally, the ISO helps in exposing your photo, but if you bump the ISO settings really high, you will start to get grains, which is good for some photos because of the film-like effect. For most of the photos, I used a 50mm prime lens. I use this lens because this is the closest focal length to the human eye, and this type of lens is best when doing portrait photography or taking pictures of people. Whew, I know that was a lot, so let's move on. In the next lesson, we will show you how we took photos of the groom and the groomsmen. See you there!
Video được Việt hóa bởi Ngọc Tân từ group tài nguyên dựng phim.